Hi, Paul. So I wanted to quickly put together a video for you that just covers the idea behind the 9G form specification, so you can get a sort of a bit of idea of how they're working and the reason that they're there and how you can use that to solve your problem that you were asking me about a little bit earlier on the forum. So what I've done is this is basically a default install. As you see it the first time you load up. And I'm just going to run through a couple of different use cases. So, and I think by doing that, it will, illustrate the functionality of a form specification and why I've done it the way I have, and the sort of power um, that it can have if you learn to leverage that. So, what we've got here, I've gone into the form designer node, and by default, you've got this 9G order book node here, right? So that's essentially the default specification that comes with the software, and inside of this node are all of your settings. Um, and it's all of these settings in here that give the order book its look and feel, and the way that you interact with it and everything else. That's all defined inside of here. But that's not to say that that's set in stone, because you don't have to use this instruction set to define your own order book. I mean, you can use it as a base and then change it, or you can create an entirely new one from scratch, and change it, or you can copy an existing one. So I'm going to quickly create a DOM here. Now, what's happened is I've clicked add, it's given me like a new form, and what happens is that the form's created with, when we look at the properties, the specification currently applied to this form is the 9G order book specification, this spec over here. You see there? And that's because, of course, this is the only spec available at this point because it's a default install. And inside of the global settings, the default specification is set to 9G order book. So at the moment, I presume what's happening is you come in here, you've probably done a few changes, and you've added your books through here, or potentially use the add here, and now you're making changes here, and you've run into this trouble where you've said to me that you make a change and it's changing all the DOMs. So the reason for that is because each DOM currently is set to use this default order book spec, but they don't have to be, because the specs are completely independent of the forms themselves. And the reason for that is that you can then build multiple form configurations. You can also share your form configuration with other people, or you can download other people's form configurations. So what I'm going to do is, just to an example to show what you were saying about the price column width. We'll just set that color there, and you see, both of them have changed. So that's the sort of what you're experiencing when you do your change, and that's because, like I've shown you, both of these are assigned with the 9G order book. So what we'll do is you want to create a new form specification. I think in your use case, you'll want to create a separate form specification for your instruments that have have a bit of a wider price on them, like the currencies that you were talking about, and if there's other particular nuances that you want to define slightly different for a certain set of instruments on the DOM. So what you can do is you click on the forms designer, and if you click add here, it's going to add a new specification, and the new spec will contain all the default values as they would be on the default book at the first install, and from there you can start changing the values, or you can copy an existing specification. So if we copied this, it's just going to be exactly the same, because nothing's changed at this point. But at a future point, if we made some modifications here and then we came and copied this, of course the new copy specification is going to contain whatever's inside of this new spec 7. So what we're going to do here now is I'll just rename this this spec to my own sort of custom, whatever I want to call it. And then what I'm going to do is, you can do this two ways. I mean, you can make changes in here while it's unapplied, in which case you're not going to see anything. So if we had to come in here, let's say we set that to blue. At the moment, this specification isn't applied to anything, so we're not seeing any changes on the screen, which is not ideal. You obviously want to see what you're doing while you're doing it. So I'm going to go to the second form and just change its assignment from the 9G order book spec to the one lot spec. So you see there now, it's actually showing that that change. And that's the crux of it, really. You have a separate set of instructions that describe everything about how the form is rendered, its appearance, colors, the font, everything about the form is essentially held independently from the form itself in an instruction set. And that goes all the way down to the actual, the interactivity. So if you see there, I've gone to the order column, and on the order column is a cancel action that's defined, and that can be changed. You could remove that, or you can add other action types. Um, so this specification, with all of its instructions as it currently stands, is essentially describing this order book and the way that it behaves and its functionality. But it can be changed to look and work completely differently. Um, really, it's up to individuals' imagination or how they want to use it. But that's essentially the way you can get around your particular issue at the moment, is by creating multiple specs and then just assigning your form to a different specification so that they aren't all referring to the same one, which is what's happening at the moment. So you probably got them all assigned to 9G order book. And then one last thing I'll show you quickly while you're on here is that in the background, if you look in your 9G directory, you'll find the specs directory, and there's our default. It's an XML file, and that relates to this here. The reason we aren't seeing these two is because they're brand new. We've just created them and they're in memory, but I haven't clicked OK yet. It's at the point that I click OK that it saves through. So you see they've shown up there now. So what this allows you to do is now, build and define your entire DOM and the way it works and whatnot, and then share it with other people. Like if you want to send your your DOM to someone else, you can essentially just copy it and send it through. They will then drop it into their spec directory, and it will show up when you open this. As soon as you open it, when you drop it down, it will now show a new listing here. So if somebody sends you their design, and you can test this yourself, you can go into the 9G, onto the forum there and have a look in the resource manager, and then have a look. There's just a couple of test specs up at the moment. One of them is the default, but there's another one called Volatility Park. And if you download that spec and then drop it into your directory here, and then come into the settings screen, Forms Designer, you'll see it in here. It'll say Volatility Park. And then what you can do is you go into your workspace, go to one of your forms, and then assign that spec. So that's essentially the full sort of use case for sharing and applying somebody else's design and whatnot. But it also, I think, covers the question that you're asking about the fonts, and there's a lot of different configurations and ways you can probably think to actually use this to achieve sort of different ends. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. Cheers.